Day 42. I'm reading Reader Come Home by Marian Wolf, page 158. Investment in our teachers. Over the last half-century, our society has gradually handed over to teachers, arguably its most idealistic members, all the ills that society itself could not fix, particularly the pernicious effects of poverty and stressful environments on early child development. Every school community should watch the documentary The Raising of America by the filmmaker Christine Herbis Sommers for an honest, astringent accounting of how these effects last a lifetime. Most teachers, however, receive neither sufficient preparation in their graduate schools nor the professional development afterwards to meet the escalating range of challenges that confront them in today's classrooms. From an increasing range of attention and learning challenges to the particular needs of increasing numbers of dual and multi-language learners, to the use of technology in the classroom. Knowing how to introduce all children with their many differences to the reading life today is a complex set of knowledge based as any engineer, rocket scientist, or saint is ever called upon to use. Today's teachers need to be prepared with new knowledge, particularly about the reading brain and its implications for how we teach teachers and children. As Stanislas Dehaene emphasized, what we know about the reading brain circuit can enrich the development of teachers' understanding, especially concerning the merits of different forms of reading instruction. It may ultimately bridge one of the most intransigent debates about methods of teaching, the so-called reading wars. The debate that should never have been. By and large, 20th century educators were trained within two strikingly different approaches to the teaching of reading. In the approach called phonics, reading instructions begin with children understanding the basic elements underlying the alphabetic principle. That words consist of sounds or phonemes, and that these sounds correspond to letters in the alphabet, with rules that are to be learned as the entry to reading. Teaching is explicit, and the emphasis moves from a foundation in English phonemes and letters to systematic rules about connecting letters to sound and about decoding different types of words. In the approach called whole language, learning is to be implicit. The rules of decoding are to be inferred or figured out by the child, with little to no explicit instruction in decoding or emphasis on the phonemes in English. The emphasis centers on engagement in stories, authentic literature, word meanings, and the imagination of the child to the exclusion of phonic principles. Indeed, some earlier professors of education erroneously labeled phonics methods kill and drill, and characterized teachers of phonics approaches as less progressive and child-centered. Both approaches came to be favored by very fine teachers, many of whom maintain to this day a loyal, sometimes even zealous belief in the methods they were originally trained in during their teacher certification programs. Why each of these approaches ever came to exclude the emphasis of other is one of the great unfortunate errors of the 20th century. Unfortunately, it continues. Even though there is a movement toward balanced reading, The too frequent reality is a thinly veiled variation of the whole language approach with a cursory, unsystematic nod to phonic principles. This is all too understandable but lamentable. Extensive, federally funded research studies unambiguously support the importance of children's learning to read through the explicit teaching of the basic principles of decoding. While clearly supporting phonics principles, these results never mean neglecting engagement with literature, as the more recent, hopeful emphasis on what we are called common core principles for the education of our children indicates. Although difficult to implement, the revised Common Core standards embody the importance of science and imagination for teachers and students throughout the school years. The problem is that neither evidence from science nor the experience of being unable to teach many children to reach functional literacy levels has proven sufficient to many teachers across the United States and Australia, still bound by their allegiance to whole language methods. In one of the best new overview of research on reading and this topic, Mark Shainberg memorably described these methods as theoretical zombies that cannot be stopped by the conventional weapons such as empirical disconfirmation, leaving them free to roam the educational landscape. Such a situation is a double waste. It wastes the unquestionably idealistic intentions of the whole language teacher, and it thwarts learning to read for many children, especially those with reading or learning differences or dual language needs. That said, neither Seidenberg nor I would ever take 1 minute away from the whole language teacher's time spent on bringing words, stories, and the life of reading enjoyment to children, as long as they do not preclude a systematic, informed approach to learn the phonemes of the language, the alphabetic principle, and decoding rules. So I guess Wolf really wants to both, right? So I should stop here. Please correct me if you can.